Welcome to Watercolor Studio 42. Today I'm kind of still out to sea here a little bit with my sailboats and whatnot. Myself personally, I never got too involved with sailing, but I've been out with other folks. And I kind of like the idea of the sailboats because it's quieter. You know, you don't have the motor running and so forth. And it's kind of peaceful out there. My son, my oldest son, lives in Missouri. He does have about a 32-foot sailboat, but he sails it on like a pretty good sized lake. I just forgot the name of the lake. It probably begins with a letter. It has like Stockton Lake or something like that up in Missouri, or over in Missouri. The best I ever did was, as far as boats go, I had a 6-foot rowboat one time that my dad bought. It was spanking new. A friend of ours built them for a hobby, and so we painted it and whatnot. And I should say my parents, they had a place down in West Wareham, and there was a small pond that I guess they used to feed the cranberry bogs and so forth, flood the cranberry bogs in the winter. So I used to take the rowboat out. It was only about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 footer. It wasn't very large. And I used to practice rowing out there, you know, kind of turning and whatnot. So I get all my exercise in rowing the boat around on this little pond. But other than that, I never got too much into sailing. I like to take cruises. You know, those are good. They were a lot of fun and whatnot. But you can't do that often. Okay, now what I've done here is I've kind of marked out a little bit. I've been using a permanent marker, and I kind of draw the picture in with the marker, let that dry a bit. It dries very fast, and then from there I just paint the picture in. And what I've been doing, and you can save yourself a little bit of paint, if you have a photograph that you're working from, just look at the colors that would be involved in that particular photograph. You know, are you going to have a sunny sky, you know, a warmer sky, a blue, combination of both? And so I have this little picture that I brought in that I painted a while back, but it's so light that it's one of those pictures you can't see it from a distance in a large room, but it's good for a small little area, you know, like maybe in the kitchen or something, where you can see it up a little bit closer. But it's a couple sailboats in there. I usually try to deal with 3 of something, uneven numbers, 1 or 3 or 5 or whatever. And but this happens to have just 2 sailboats that I put in, but I added a seagull up there flying between the 2. So it just formed like a triangle between this area of where the 2 sailboats are. And of course I've got some land coming out in here. You could have some land off in the distance, whatever way you want to arrange your composition. So I like to do boats. Some come out a little bit better than others, and sometimes it's just a little bit heavy with the paint, so I like to work a little bit lighter, you know, softer. Now in this case, I'm dealing with working horizontally here, so usually I decide on thirds. Now in this particular composition, 1/3 is going to be land or the water. I consider that like land, water, and then 2/3 would be mostly the open sky. So in this particular case, now sometimes you could do the picture like the one back here. You can do it, you know, vertically, and just kind of squeeze things in a little bit tighter that way. But anyways, So usually any picture that I do outdoors, I always do the sky first, the upper part, and then I do the land or the water, in this case the water, for the most part, and then I'll have a little bit of land projecting out over the water. And then the finale would be just doing the finishing touches. Now, what you have to be careful of, you don't try to do over detail something. If you're working on a picture that's the boat's off in the distance, you're only going to see mostly the shape of the sail and probably the body of the boat. And the little figures in the cabin or any other fittings or whatever that would be on the boat would be almost just touching them with a fine point pen, and just put little specks in there to just indicate or suggest the body or whatever might be on the boat. But anyways, so that's how we go. So now I'm going to start off, and I usually take the biggest brush I have and just wet the paper where the sky is going to go. Just wet the paper. Now, the idea behind wetting the paper is to kind of loosen up the fiber of the paper, but also when you apply the color is going to blend in, and it's not going to make it look like brush strokes. You know, it's going to be soft. You want to make the sky sort of soft for the most part. I'm just painting around here. Now, sometimes I cover up where I want to keep something white. I usually cover up with some masking tape, or they do have masking fluid, but myself personally, I've never had too much luck with it. It kind of dries up too soon, and it comes in a little bottle. It goes about $9 to $12 for a bottle. So you're better off to use masking tape or even rubber cement to protect it where you want the white to be. Okay, come across here. All right, kind of look at it at a glance here. It's very wet right now. Now, a lot of times, if you feel that it's a little bit too wet, I just take a piece of paper towel and just very carefully just blot it a bit, pick up some of the moisture. You don't want to blot it too hard, but just to pick up some of those areas that are a little bit kind of too much water there. Okay, so we'll put that aside. Now, let's see. I wanted to mention, if you know what your picture is going to be about, look at, if it's a photograph, look at what the colors are that you need, and just put those colors on your palette. You don't have to put that much out. If you're doing a smaller area, I just put out maybe it's about the size of a dime or less of paint a lot of times if I'm doing a smaller picture like this. This particular size takes next to nothing for paint. Yeah, very minimal amount of paint you need. So don't put out too much in your palette. Okay, there you go. Now, so I got watered down the sky. Now I can stick with this brush, or I can use a smaller. Usually I use flat brushes across the bottom, flat brushes. But let's stick with this one. And I'm just going to put just ever so little paint. We'll mix that up. I'm using this phthalo blue here. Phthalo blue is very similar to cerulean blue. It's a very soft blue. And we'll just put a little bit of a wash in here. See how when you put the paint into the wet area, you don't get kind of heavy brush lines. Very soft. Okay, I can go a little bit more with a little bit more paint and probably just a little bit more water here. Okay, just across in here. Now, if you want the sky wherever you want the sunlight to come from, just kind of leave that a little bit open and just kind of work the blues off this way towards your left side. If you want the light to come in from your right. See, if the paper's wet, it's very soft. It's like a soft sky. Today we've had a nice blue sky outside. The weather hasn't been that great as of late. We've had probably some tough weather. But today happened to turn out good. Sky is blue and not overcast with any smoke or fog or whatever. Okay, now, here we go. That's it. That's the blue. Now, what I usually do, if you want to warm it up, I start with some of my yellow first. That's the lighter color. Now, if you have a little bit of paint still on your brush, you might start mixing. So you have to be careful. Just pull some of that yellow across it from right to left. Pull it into here. And again, your paper's wet, so it's going to be soft. Very important that you control the moisture that you have on your paper. Now, if that's too bright, you can either blot it or use your brush like a sponge also, and just pull that paint across in here. Nice and soft. Okay. Now, I do have white acrylic. I don't use the Chinese white, but sometimes if you get a little bit too much paint on the sails and you don't want that to be the case, you can always touch it up with a little bit of white acrylic. And acrylic paint is a water-based paint, and it dries fast. It's plastic base to it, so it doesn't reactivate too soon, being plastic material. But you pull that across, pull that right into here, and that's some of your yellow. And here you go. I'm kind of looking at the picture I did at home. Not that it's going to come out exactly like that, but it might be a little bit close to it. Let's try a little bit of orange now. Using the same brush. This happens to be probably a 1-inch flat. And the picture I have it here, I have a band of yellow, and I just pull it from right to left, pull that into this area over here. There you go. You can have it a little bit stronger if you want, right in through there. All right. See how soft the paper goes on if you wet the paper first. You'll see, but pull that in here. Okay. That's a nice color. Now if you want to go a little bit heavier, don't go too much more orange on your brush, but you can go a little bit heavier from this corner in. Here we go. A little bit darker. All right, pull it right out. You pull it almost. I usually don't go half and half, but I kind of go beyond. I put a little mark on my paper so I know approximately where halfway is. So I go push the colors beyond halfway. So it's more like 1/3, 2/3, something else. Let's see, down in here. Okay. Still wet, the paper's still wet. So that's why it's reacting nice and soft here. Okay, all right. Now, I want to introduce a little bit of the red, but the reds I usually use is the alizarin crimson, and they call it, sometimes they have a quinacridone rose. But that's a little bit tricky to pronounce sometimes. So, but you take a little bit of that color, and I pulled a little bit of that from left to right across into here like that, a little band of that. Again, it's nice and soft. You can pour it down, pull it right out from over in here. You can go up into here if you want with that nice soft color. I don't know, I have fun with color. I like to push and pull color around a little bit. I'm far from being an expert on color, but I just kind of look at whatever the picture is and kind of try to match it as best I can. Sometimes I go a little bit heavier, a little bit deeper with the blues and so forth towards the edges and whatnot. Okay, see how that you can pull that across like that. I'm making it pretty much close to the picture. I'm looking at my own painting, copying my own painting. Now, if you want, while you're waiting for the sky to dry a bit, you can come down and let's do some of the water. So let's backtrack a little bit where we were. You don't have to clean your brush off that much. And I'm just going to put some, now I didn't wet down here, okay? I didn't wet it, so I can make the colors a little bit more streaky, if you will, across here, but you don't have to. Now I got a little spot of yellow there. I don't want to see too much of that. I just blot it, and we can kind of cover that up. Just take it out. Just blend it in. The ocean's going to be kind of salt water anyway, so it's going to have a green hint to it. Maybe. It will be now anyway. Okay. All right. I always start off soft with the color because you can always go darker. When it dries out, a lot of times you have to go back and go over a few things so to bring out more contrast. The one thing about this particular painting is that it doesn't have as much, contrast to it. I probably could have gone a little bit more with the paint. Let's get a little bit more blue in this. Now, I did start off here, sort of a dry brush, or dry paper rather, the brush is close, the paint on it. And I can always go a little bit more daring from the corners here. I always like a darker color for the bottom, the base of this particular picture. Now, a lot of times, it's amazing how your colors kind of work, especially with watercolor, how you can push and pull colors into each other. Nice and soft. You might want to get used to that because what happens a lot of times, people put too much paint on the brush and they come in too heavy. See how dark that is? Well, while it's still wet, you can take your brush and just pull that out. Pull it out of there. And you might want to go darker over here. Let's put more blue on the brush here. Okay. Here we go. A little bit stronger. I at least want to probably get as dark as it is in here. So I've got to be less conscious of being too much into the light. Okay, see, this is just a lot of soft washes for the background. Probably off here. I don't know what I want to do in here. You know what I could do, seeing that I'm over in that area, why can't we just take a little bit more color, put some more yellow in there. Let's do this. Across in here. and put some more color of the sky reflecting on the water, and that can be done just about everywhere. You can put some of that into the blue down here. So what we're doing so far, we're just adjusting to the sky and the water textures. Let's go a little bit heavier over here. Okay. Now, having said that, we can come back into that with a little bit of blue. So I'm working back and forth here between the yellow and my blue, a little bit more on the blue side. Oh, come on. I'm being too cautious here. All right, that's better. That's a little bit better. Okay, so we're going down through here, and I think I should have put a little bit more blue out on my, I got plenty of it, big tube of it, pretty good size tube. Let's put a little bit more blue in here. A phthalo blue. Okay, so now I'm being very skimpy with my blues here. Okay, now it's turning a little bit green, quite a bit green in here. So we might have to take and pull a lot of that out of there. See how while it's still wet, use your brush almost like a sponge and just pull some of that out of there. Start to get a little bit greenish color. Well, salt water. All right, anyway, let's see if we can get some more color into here. I was being too conservative with my blue today, my gosh. A little bit more out of the tube here. Yeah. Make sure I have enough here. All right, let's see what we can do. Now I have to be careful because I can get carried away and get too heavy. I don't want to do that, but I can go a little bit heavier out of this corner. A little bit more out of this corner. It's probably the landform is going to kind of act as a little bit of a barrier to the sun, maybe. Maybe it will. Now, what I like to do myself, personally, because I don't get down too often to the beach, but actually, I just like to paint right on location. And you get the smell of the salt here, you get the sound of the birds and the seagulls and the movement of the water and all that, and it's very, very relaxing to paint outside. Okay, now what I did here, I put a lot more yellow into that in my picture here. So of course you start putting yellow into your blues, you're gonna get a little bit of a hint. Now it's turning greener, so that's all right. I can always go back and work on that a little bit more later on. Now, let's see what else we might want to do. Okay, I think we're all set on that one. Let's get this out of the way. Just want to touch this up a little bit. Now, what I can do here, while I'm waiting for some other things to dry out a bit, let's see if we can put some of that ground in there, some of the sand on the beach. Now, the colors that I like to use for that, I use a lot of times raw sienna. I'll show you what that looks like when you lighten it up a bit. This is raw sienna. It almost looks like it's, there you go. It has a little bit of hint in it of sort of a soft brownish color. But the thing is, if you pull that out, when you I usually put it down near the bottom a little bit more, so it looks like some sand in that area. You can just lighten it up a bit. I kind of drew two contours there, one in pencil. Now, if you don't want the pencil to show, you can erase it later on. Okay, something like that. Blot it a bit. So you get sort of a sandy color. And then what I usually do sometimes, I take my other, my darker color, brown, sepia, very dark, very dark. Probably a little bit too dark sometimes. That can go down around here on the water line. And you could kind of have some fun with this if you want to make it look textural. It's the way you pull the paint around a little bit. You can make the bottom edge a little bit, bumpier. You want to make it look more rocky. If you want to leave some sand in there, that's okay too. Again, you can use the brush like a sponge, pull some of the color out. Follow that contour a little bit. I probably can change that contour around a little bit more. It's a little bit different from the picture I have here. Okay, so we're coming out on here. Now I want to pull that out. I'm going to take some of this out of here. Just pull that down, kind of into the water a little bit that way. Kind of have it kind of blend out. Okay. Alright. This is just kind of getting some of the contour of the ground in there. You can spend as much time as you want on that. If I want to go too far with that, pick up some of that. Okay. Now, as far as let's see. Now, the body of the boat, you can kind of put that in. Again, depending on what color you want to use. If you have white, you got to make the water contrast around it. So what I usually do, I compromise a little bit, and I use my Payne's gray, and I paint in the bottom of the boat. Now, I turn it sometimes to make it a little bit easier. So I start up in here, and you can paint wet on the dry, or you can put a little bit of water, not that much, but a little bit, a drop of water, so that you can pull the paint back and forth somewhat like this. Okay? So you want to stay somewhat in that area. Now, because it's a man-made object, you can kind of make sure you make that the body of the boat a little bit. Let's see. I'm going to go with a little heavier brush here. I'm not crazy about that way that was pulling across. Let's take some of that out. Pull this right down through here on the bottom of the boat. It's getting a little bit brown in it. A little bit. Okay, up into the bow. Pull that back. Back and forth. Nice. You want to get that sort of somewhat even there. And it doesn't have to be that dark a color either. You can sort of tame it down if you want. A little bit on the bow here. I'm going to pull that down a little bit more. Probably take some of the paint out of there. Okay. Let me see what it looks like. Right into here. Okay. Now, we don't have to paint too much as far as detail goes. Yeah, get that in. Now, the further away the boat is, the one off the distance, that's almost just one brush stroke. You just put a line across here, and that's about it. Not much more than that. Just a little line in there. Okay, so now you want to lighten this up. I just lift it out a little bit more. Make it lighten that up. Right into here. Okay. Now, the thing is that what we want to do now is see if we can get some more shadow on the sails. Now you can take some of that reflection of the sky, and you can put some little bit of a warm color on the sail, but not too much. Just a hint of some color there. Just to see if that's too much. That might be too much. I just wet the brush and lift it. Use the brush like a sponge and just take some of that out of there. You just want to make a little bit of a hint of some color on the sail. Okay, bring it down into here. There you go. The other one you can do about the same thing if you want. You can put a little bit of sunlight on that sail. Okay, a little bit on the bright side, so just pull it down a bit. Lift some of that color out. You want to blot it. Make sure you got a clean spot on your towel and just lift some of that color out if you want. And just pull it in a little bit more. There you go. Sort of. Just a hint of color. Now, some of this stuff, sometimes you want to practice a little bit ahead of time on a piece of scrap paper, watercolor paper, same texture as you're using here, but you may want to just practice some of that. Now that's a little bit too much water. Blot that out. Whoops. Now you can pull this around a bit. You want to make that a lot lighter in here on that sail. So you may want to pull some of that down. Pull that out of there. It's much darker than, this is much darker than my original picture I did. So you just water it down a little bit. And I'm using the brush like a sponge to lift some of that out of there. Here we go. The sails on a boat, they're not like really a white, because over a period of time they pick up, like everything else, water stains and so forth. So they're not exactly white in a lot of cases. Canvas being what it is, you know. Now, let's do a little bit. We'll do a little bit on this one. Put a little bit of shading into that. If that's, see, it's a little bit too much, you can pull it out. Just pull some of that out of there. Lighten it up a bit. Okay, still a little bit too dark. Find a clean spot and give it a blot. And then keep pulling that out in this area here. Sometimes it gets a little bit stubborn, and worst comes to worst, you can always hit it with a little bit of white, you know, my acrylic paint, which I might do anyways before I get through here. Oops, there you go. All right. Okay, now a lot of this finishing, a little bit of cleaning it up, you might want to do with a very fine pen. I thought I had a regular pen here somewhere. That's a marker. But you don't want to do that too soon. You can use a pencil. Of course, it's not, it isn't like water or like paint, but nevertheless. Now, I'm looking at this now, and this is a little bit brighter. I don't know if I want that to be that bright. Where's that brush I was using here? Somewhere. Oh, here we go. I've got another one in the bucket there. You can always take and wet this down. You want to get some of that brighter color out of there. And use a clean spot on your towel. Blot it out, and you can lighten that up. Doesn't have to be exactly the same shade as this one. Now, on the landform, you can go back. This is up to you. You can kind of work some texture into that if you want. Whatever you want. This probably might be out of the sunlight, so it can be a little bit darker over here. Okay, let's turn this around a bit. You can pull that out. You can leave a little bit of texture in there. Could be a few rocks around the base, down through here. Go right off to the edge. More texture up in here. Now you can make that as much texture as you want in here. And take some of that out of there. Whatever you want to do with this. You're probably better off. I myself personally, I like to paint outside, and I really pay attention to what I'm looking at. When you're doing this, you're kind of painting from memory, what it might look like. Now, let's put some shadow in the water. You want that boat to show up a little bit, so you're going to put a little bit of reflection down here in the water. Shape of the boat, a little bit of the sail, maybe show a little bit of that, how that might go. Chop it up. Okay, across here. You can do the same thing with this one. Put a little bit of the shadow of the boat, maybe a little bit of the warmer color of the sail across there, whatever. Now, there's a lot of little fussy stuff that you want to do, and a lot of times what you have to do is let the paint dry before you go back into it. You can use a regular marker. I usually use the ones that are permanent, so that if you want to go over it with some paint, you can do that more. However you want to work that. Now, if there's any other little fussy detail, I just put it in. I use a pen, and you might want to show like a little bit of the cabin. You might want to show maybe the part of the a couple of dots. Could be people. Put a few dots up on the side here. You could show a little bit more of the contour. Like I said, you have to let it dry more with the when you use the watercolor. And you could put a few more lines in. If you want to put the lines in freehand, you can, or you can use a ruler. Doesn't matter. Let's see, more or less across the bottom here, so it shows up a little bit more. Okay. Whatever, you're going to have a few little ropes in here and there coming down. Now, you normally, I don't have really a little fine pen, but you can, put some more. You can put a little bird, seagull or something flying up there. Another one over here, just a dot, pull out. It's like a bent V shape, bend the V out type of thing. Now this is up to you if you want to show a little bit more of the open ocean. What I would do myself personally, I would take a little bit more of my blue and make the ocean line right across here a little bit darker through there, so it shows up a little bit more contrast. Just make that a little bit darker right across through here. Pick it up on the here somewhat, so you get more of a contrast in your picture. Now you can put in as much as you want as far as detail goes, but myself personally, I usually hold off a little bit more and let it dry out before I put any more pen work into it. But you definitely can put in, indicate more boulders or rocks up in here. Clean up a little bit of the contour of the boat. Just rework it a little bit more with the texture. You don't want to get carried away too much. Don't make it too fussy, because you wouldn't probably see that much detail. The further away something is, the less detail that you'd see when you do the picture. So anyway, so there's a few things that you can still do in here. If you want to put a little bit of landform off here, over here, something else coming, you could put another little boat in there if you want, a third something off in the distance, so you get the tree. I got the tree with a little bit using the seagull as the third object, but you got three in there. You want this sail over here to show up a little bit more. Again, I would take a regular pen or the thinnest marker that you have, and just put in a little bit more texture, a few more ropes here and there. You can add as much as you want to the picture, but don't get carried away. You can do too much. Now, another thing, what I do a lot of times is before I do anything, I put tape around the outside to make a sort of a false map around the picture. And but what you have to do is make sure that you paint right to the edge. Now, if that's too light here, you might want to just give it a little bit more contrast. And I would take a little bit more blue and introduce a little bit darker blue from into here. Pull that in here, just so you get more of a contrast of color. Pull that right into there, cross into here, carry it right out, pull it right out, and see where it's too lighted through here? Just hit it with a little bit of blue. Even the water can be a little bit darker here. Okay, go right to the edge, pull it right out. Now you don't want to get too streaky, so what I usually do is just wet it down, just pull some of the streaks out, wet it down more. So pull some of that out and pull it in. There you go. Try to make it look more natural, the way the sky would be. You do a little bit more through here if you want. If that edge is a little bit too light over here, you can make that a little bit more contrast with your blue. Pull that in. Down here across the bottom. Now this bottom looks, I can get a little bit heavier with my blue across the bottom like that. We could go a little bit more with the water. Break it up. Use the edge of your brush. Sometimes you could use flat edge or just turn the brush a little bit and use the thin edge. Just pull that out, break it up a little bit more, chop it up more like water, and whatnot. Just cut through it. Okay, around here. You could see a little bit more as a shadow of maybe the land here, but you can save that for later too. Let this dry a little bit more. Okay, let's do a little bit more contrast out in here. All right. Okay, well, like I said, you can get a little bit more fussier with it if you want, but I wouldn't go crazy with all too much detail. Kind of the less you do, sometimes it's better. Now, see if I can get this tape off the edges here. I'll get that right down to the edge. That's better. Okay, now we're going to take the tape off. I try to fix it so that I can catch the tape a little better. I don't know if I help my cause at all or whatever. You still have to be careful when you pull the tape. Once you get started, don't just pull it off on a kind of a 45-degree angle so you don't damage the surface of the watercolor paper. Here we go. Once you get started, everything kind of follows pretty good. It makes sort of a false mat around it. Usually the mat itself is usually white for watercolor. Here we go. Okay. Well, I think we need a little bit more of work on the canvas through here, just over here a little bit more. But I'm going to probably work on a little bit more contrast. I kind of like the water so far, not bad through here, but we still have to do a little bit more opening, bring it out a little bit more with the sails, and clean up probably the bottom body of the boat. But that's more or less the idea of making a softer type of painting with watercolor. Now, some people can come in. You can come in and do it a lot darker if you want. That's up to you. You can come in and paint everything darker color. But I always start myself. I can always go darker if I want a little bit later. And now, if there's any touch-up work to do, I have my a tube of acrylic white. And you can put some little white here or there, and it's almost like using corrective ink on, when you're writing or something. Keep a tube of white around. It doesn't have to be a large tube like this. It could be a smaller tube. But anyways, that's the idea of doing this. And like I said, it still needs a little bit of cleaning up into here. I kind of putted around too much with a marker, I think, on that area. So that's pretty much it. Now, you could do that particular size. Usually you need probably a 16 by 20 mat. And this one here, I've been doing a lot of this particular size lately, 8 by 10s and so forth. 11 by 14s. And what I do, I used to get the wood frames. I used to buy them at Benny's, and they may have a little bit of a defect here or there, a knot, or some of the corners aren't perfect, but they used to be fairly reasonable. You could buy the frame with the glass for about $6 or $7, some of these smaller ones, and then even the larger ones weren't more than probably $9 or something, along with the wood frame and the glass. And of course, the mat, you can either buy a mat or have it cut. I do have a mat cutter of my own, so I usually cut my own mats. And this is a single mat, but you can have one that has just a little bit of color in it, and they call it like a double mat. And this little strip around here is just a liner that you can put in around the edges. If you want to carry some of the color that you have in the picture, let's say if you haven't used enough brown, so you can have a dark brown outline here. So it takes some of this color, carries that color around in your composition. So it's a matter of color distribution and stuff like that you work with. And like I said, I usually put my colors out a little bit ahead of time, the ones that I'm going to use. Now sometimes you might have to take maybe another color that they haven't put on their palette and add that to it. But the big thing is to let this dry out good, then come back, do all your touch-up work, and then look at it. If it looks okay, sign it. Try to sell it or whatever. Put it in an art show. So anyways, kind of running out of time here today. All I can say is that some of the museums and so forth, they're starting to pick up. The Attleboro Museum has started up. We found that a lot of places have slowed down and just starting to get back. The Watercolor Society over at Slater Park in Rhode Island, I think they just opened maybe 3 or 4 days out of the week now, towards the end of the week. So, but they've started to pick up a little bit more. Some of the art associations, I know the one in Taunton has been very active as of late. And some of the senior centers have picked up too with some of their art programs and painting classes. So anyways, that's it folks for today. And what I always say before I close, sometimes if I remember, I'll hold up a brush and say brushes up and thanks for being with us. Okay? Take care.